That's right. How are you?
Well, we're not disturbing anybody. All this stuff, we purposely put all this stuff until that week because it's not convenient for those kids in the house. Trying to think what we did in high school. We were building mixing about the kitchen in high school. Especially the sit somewhere else in town waiting for the bus to go all over
Hello. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the second
Second public hearing on the town budget for 2015 and 2016. Let me state for the record, the village president from the Board of Finance, the representatives Richard Dobson, Ted Rummel, Gary Fisher, Nancy Slater, alternate Michael Piper, and myself, chairman. This is the evening, the Board of Finance has spent the last 6 weeks reviewing the various budget requests from the various town departments, and tonight we will be making recommendations to the public as to what we believe will be the appropriate budget to be submitted to taxpayers at the town referendum. If you have the blue handout in front of you, I will go through this with you, and basically this is the summary of what the Board of Finance has recommended. If you look at the first page, this is the basic budget which is being recommended and has been approved by the Board of Finance. On the top half of that page, you'll see an item called requested expenditures. General government budget of $10,127,194. If you go to the second page, the page beyond that, you will see the breakdown of all the expenditures that come up to that. And the first selectman will be here to explain this if necessary. And for the public library, we've recommended a budget of $531,000. And on the next page, over the back of the selectmen's page, is the library budget request. For the debt service budget, that basically is a summary of all the debt obligations, bonds, and bond anticipation notes that we are legally obligated to pay. So that number comes basically from our obligation to pay our bonds. That's $216,000. And the Board of Education budget, which has been recommended by us, is $27,622,500. And that is on the third page of what you submitted to you. And the total the total recommended budget is $40,296,885. And below that, you'll see anticipated revenues. This is basically how the budget will be paid for. General government revenues, $3,360,000. These are revenues that will go to the Board of Selectmen. And basically that is about $200,000 higher than last year's revenues. And some of the significant changes is there's going to be a $50,000 increase in the ZREC income. That's income we receive from having putting solar panels on the town's building, the CLMP. That item is up $52,000. And we have an increase in state grants. We have a significant increase in the LoCIP grant, an extra $100,000, which the state is giving us for road improvements. And in effect, this is going to be a $137,000 increase in the Board of Education, in the Board of Selectmen revenues. In the Board of Education revenues, the Board of Education revenues is $10,249,000. The largest part of that is the state educational cost sharing grant, which is the same this year. There's been no increase in that this year. And that basically, there is somewhat of a decrease there from last year. There's about a $100,000 decrease in tuition from union students. We have a small number of union students in our system, and then that's has brought that down by about 100,000. Additional revenue tax collector, we have estimated an additional 150,000 over the last several years because there's been some more aggressive action taken by the tax collector in terms of using collection agencies and some attorneys who are expert in tax collection and tax sales. So we do anticipate an increase in tax collections because of that. The next item is cash balance. That's $16,000, which is left over from a sewer project, I believe. Is that correct? And that now can be turned into the general fund because that is not going to be used in that project. And in the excess, the transfer in $443,000, that represents a $290,000 from the excess cost grant. What that is money which is given to the town to pay for special ed costs. And because we do not need that money goes into the general fund. And $153,000, which is money that was not expended on the pump station project. So that money goes back into the general fund. So that's $443,000 that can be used to fund next year's budget. Then we make an adjustment for uncollected taxes based on a percentage of taxes we do not believe will be paid by the end of the fiscal year. And the $65,000 is the abatement for firemen who receive a tax benefit because of their service to the fire departments. So that leaves a total revenue from non-tax sources of $14,403,000, which means that we have to make up a $25,893,846 is what we have to get through general taxation. And some of that comes from an increase in the grand list, but the net effect is we have to come up with $484,000 to an increase in the mill rate, which will require a 0.6 increase in the mill rate for next year's budget over this year's. Now, as to the logic and the reasoning that the Board of Finance went through, these are the things that we noted. The original request from the Board of Education first were a $912,000 increase in their budget. The original request from the Board of Selectmen were a $385,000 increase in their budget. These are the smallest increases, or requested increases, that we've received in several years. So we respected the fact that we thought both sides had made an attempt to be frugal in their presentation to us. We also took into account that in last year's budget process, with respect to the Board of Education, we ended up with a Board of Education budget that had a zero increase over the year before. The net effect of that is that the school system was required to eliminate 7 teaching positions, and we do not believe we could force them to make them go through that process again. Otherwise, we would create a school system that would be substantially not effective and would not be accomplishing what we want for our students in town. With respect to the Board of Selectmen's budget, there was presentations made by several town officials indicating that there's been deferred maintenance with respect to maintenance of our hobbies, maintenance of our town buildings, and maintenance of several items of town equipment. And we felt that these issues had been put off because of cuts in prior year's budgets, and we could not expect them to do that again. So those are the philosophies that we were thinking about as we went through this. We therefore, based on all those characterizations, we made a reduction in the Board of Ed request of about $200,000 and a reduction in the Board of Selectmen's budget of $100,000. The net effect is a Board of Education budget which is 3.4% higher than last year's, and also 3.4% higher than from 2 years ago. With respect to the Board of Education budget, or the Board of Selectmen budget, it'll be 2.9% over last year's budget. Now, I understand this does result in an increase in tax rate, which is a burden for people and a hardship for everyone. I would never deny that fact. However, our obligation as the Board of Finance is to balance the needs of the town with the taxpayers' ability to pay, and we therefore did this balancing act. We noted that the tax rate, which is requested here, a 0.6 increase is approximately 2% increase over the current tax rate. It's also 2% over the tax rate from 2 years ago, indicating that it's basically 1% a year, which we feel when making an attempt to meet the needs of the town, meet the needs of the school system, it was a reasonable compromise. So that is what the Board of Finance is recommending to the taxpayers this year. Now we will now have a presentation by the First Selectman to explain what cuts are made in the Board of Selectmen's budget, and then the Superintendent will make the presentation with respect to the cuts in the education budget. Following that, the program, the floor will be open for comments or questions from members of the public.
Good evening, everyone. I got a very simple presentation this evening. What I did was I took all the lines that the Board of Selectmen made cuts, put them into a spreadsheet, created a PDF file, and I'm just going to go line by line to show everybody where we made the cuts. There was some cuts and some additions. So this represents any changes that were made since the last public hearing. First line, salary, First Selectman took the 1.5% raise out. Salary for Selectmen, the 2 Selectmens, we took that out. General government salaries, we took $17,000 from that. Salaries for the deputy registrars of voters, they never had a salary before. The registrar had requested a salary. We had taken that out. We have the assessor's office salary at reduction of $610. Board of Assessment Appeals, salary reductions of $30 for the 3 members of the Board of Assessment Appeals. Tax collector, salary administrative, $835. Part-time help, tax collector, last year was $5,000, she requested $7,000, we brought it back to $5,000 again. Treasurer, salary for the CFO, $795. Treasurer part-time, elected, $90. Town clerk, $870 reduction. Building maintenance salaries, $720. Town hall miscellaneous services, $3,585. Fuel oil, we reduced $20,000. We're looking at buying our fuel almost 90 cents a gallon less this year than we did last year. When we first put the budget presentation together, we didn't have good figures and numbers. As we get further on in the budget process, things start to evolve, so we were able to save $20,000 there. Energy projects, they had requested 20, we cut it back to 12. Fire marshal, minus $3,910. Fuel for all buildings, then here again, we're going to have a reduction in our cost of fuel oil, so we were able to save about $20,000 there. Oh, skip, I went out of place there. Building, zoning, and finance department, town planner consultant, we added $20,000 in that line. Transfer station operations, we reduced $50,000 for the new retaining wall, or rebuilt the retaining wall project. You remember at the first public hearing, the Director of Public Works gave a presentation that we wanted to put in the budget to rebuild the wall. Well, the wall has collapsed. We have a temporary repair. He's getting prices for the repair now, and we're going to fix that wall this year. General highways, diesel fuel. Okay, and Chairman Muscat spoke about the LoSiP state grant. Actually, we have no change between our paving projects and our LoSiP state grant. What we did was we actually reduced taxpayer-funded paving projects, and we increased the LoSiP state grant side of the equation. So that had no bearing on changing anything. Lease purchase, number 16617, there's a reduction of $4,270. That's a result of taking one of the vehicles that we currently have in that lease purchase. I assigned that vehicle to the dog warden, and we're going to be paying for that out of the dog fund, which dog fund isn't generated from the taxpayer revenue, it's generated from the studies that he does and from donations that he raises for the dog fund. Parks Department salaries was reduced by $650. Social Services and Community Center wages was reduced by $800. Salary administration was $665. Staff and Family Services. We actually added $17,000 to the salaries, which are time funded at Staff and Family Services. The reason for adding the $17,000, we do have some plans. Currently, the town employees work on a 35-hour work week. Staff and Family Services, if you're not familiar with it, Staff and Family Services is like a doctor's office. We have 3 full-time staff. One of them is the executive director, and we have 1 full-time therapist and 1 office manager. We have fee-for-service clinicians who see people. The last few years, we started generating revenue. My goal has been to make Staff and Family Services revenue neutral and make it operate more professional as a doctor's office. So we're in the middle of some changes up there. We have a new executive director coming in. I want to increase the hours up there to 40 hours a week. doctors how hard it is to get in and see people. And it has, you know, it's gonna provide better service for the public, but it's also gonna give us more billable hours. So this $17,000 is actually to hire a part-time office worker who can be there to fill in the gaps when the full-time office manager isn't there. I'll go back to the doctor's office. Whenever you go see the doctor, you don't pay the doctor. You don't give him the money or her the money. You give the office staff. And part of the problem we have now is when the full-time person leaves, there's nobody there from 5 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock at night when they're still seeing clients. So we don't always get the collection of the money that we need. So by putting somebody in that office, then we'll have somebody, be just like going to the doctor's office. They check in when they get there, they check out when they leave, and they would pay the bill. And we're working on a whole new billing system up there. We do get some state funds that actually help offset some of the people that can't afford to pay, that don't have any insurance, and there's a sliding scale. But this is a plan to try to give more and better service, and at the same time, increase our billable hours. And at the bottom, that totaled $100,000. Most of we see the salary cuts at the first public hearing. I had said that, I ran some different scenarios based on going into negotiations for contracts. I ran 4 different scenarios. I put forward my worst case scenario, which I don't believe would be worst case scenario. So I went back through, we were able to cut that back. I still would like to open the town hall and be open on Fridays. There's not a Friday that I'm there that somebody doesn't come to the door and isn't upset. I know at the public hearings last year, people were asking why we weren't open on Fridays. So I would like to, and I have a couple of different ways. It does have to be negotiated. When the previous first selectman went to a 4-day work week, there's no negotiations. I'm going to do it because everybody loved it. They didn't fight it. To go back, and I'm not going to say they're going to fight it, but I do have to negotiate it in that we're going to go back to a 4-day work week. So there is a cost, and I do have a plan to try to minimize that cost, but I don't want to publicly negotiate with the employees and the unions at a hearing to tell them what my plan is. But my plan is to try to be able to do it without increasing the cost to the taxpayers, with a minimal increase to the taxpayers, such as what they would get in a general wage increase. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, and for the Board of Education, I know we have the chairman of the board and superintendent here, so one or two of you will make a presentation. You go together.
Getting a presentation loaded. I believe everybody that came in, I'm not sure if you all have this flyer. This was created by a member of our staff, Early Education Collaborative. Very simple on the back. 0.63 mils. This is based on an average person's home. The assessment of $127,000. That equates to probably about $175,000 home. $127,000 assessment. But they break it down on here. The taxes equals $81 a year, $6.75 a month, or $1.56 a week. And that's $81 is spread over 2 years. There was no increase last year, so, we started from a whole this year. We tried to present a very reasonable and very frugal budget. So I wanted to point out how small the increase actually is. Thank you.
Good evening. The Stafford Board of Education met on April 9th during a special meeting to discuss revisions to the approved budget from February 23rd, again based on the Board of Finance directive. This is a little difficult to see. It is posted on our website though. What this actually enumerates is the spreadsheet here is all of the changes to the budget, not just the reduction. But one of the things that all of the boards are required to do is constantly be reviewing those budgets. So you see some additions, you see some subtractions. What I'm going to do though is actually highlight for you what the actual reductions are that are reflected there. In the first reduction of $130,000 total includes a reduction in Magnet Elementary School tuition of $16,000 and Magnet Secondary tuition to be in the amount of $54,000. What we decided to do is actually budget next year based on the current number of students that we have attending those schools, rather than budgeting for students that we're not sure will in fact be attending next year. Also included in that figure is one private out-of-district special education tuition, if you will, at $60,000. Again, our rationale is right now we are budgeting for, we have 15 students currently in those types of placements, and rather than have one additional placement as a placeholder, we've decided to budget on the current number of students. Another reduction that you see there are copiers, $30,192. That reduction for copiers is actually a result of an initiative that's underway. We actually had a vendor cruising around the schools, checking out our copiers and collecting data to help us analyze the efficient use of those copiers district-wide. There's a $15,100 reduction in painting, carpet, and tile replacement. Of course, those would simply, that reduction here in this year's budget would result in postponement of making those changes in a couple of our schools. The board also decided to increase the monthly pre-kindergarten tuition fee from $60 per month to $80 per month. That would generate a possible $10,000 in revenue based on our current and anticipated enrollment. We also noted reductions to supplies, curriculum materials, and technology, $9,500, $9,000, and $5,400 respectively, which includes an upgrades for reading, some reading materials at the secondary schools, audiovisual supplies, LCD bulbs, those are for our projectors, for on our screens, and some laptop batteries, etc. Previously eliminated from the board's budget was freshman basketball. And so freshman basketball is included in this budget, this list of reductions at $5,098. Our rationale is that our youngsters up through the age of 15 do have the opportunity to participate in the rec program for basketball. By eliminating freshman basketball, we still allow students the opportunity to participate on the junior varsity and the varsity teams. There's also reductions, again, from the maintenance and chiller repairs. So there's a slight reduction there. And as well as the elimination of a sod cutter, which is ground equipment. That would have provided the ability to utilize the grounds immediately after underground repairs had been made. You'll notice a reduction of $3,000 in the spreadsheet in the teacher support line, the team mentors, and that's due to our anticipation of a lesser need for new teachers due to fewer new hires next year. Initially anticipated to be a 10% contractual increase, the board reduced the increase for the athletic trainer with whom we contract with Johnson Memorial Hospital to 5%. It's important to note that this year there was a 0% increase in that contracted line, so we're reducing that from 10% to 5%. In the last figure, again, I've already commented on a couple of adjustments, but I do want to point out that there was a grant adjustment in there. Again, we're constantly reviewing and analyzing our budget, and that's a result of a staff salary being overcharged to one of the federal grants. So the resultant reduction is $200,000 that you can see at the bottom there. And so this is the revised summary sheet. Again, I'm hoping that folks can see that. We do have the small handouts in the back of the room. I would like to point out that our proposed revision, the initial budget was a 3.39%, but with the $200,000 reduction, we're now looking at a 2.6% increase for next year in the Board of Education budget. If we spread that over 2 years, as noted, this year we're operating on a minus 0.08% budget. It actually equates to 1.28% increase to support our public schools over the course of 2 years. So again, the result is a budget totaling $27,622,600, which is an increase of $712,805, or 2.65. And lastly, I'd like to remind folks and actually share with you that Sam Adlerstein, our business manager, and I met with the first selectman and Lisa Baxter, CFO, last week, or actually the week before last week. Last week school was not in session, to actually begin those discussions about shared responsibilities and services. So we've had our kickoff meeting, and we have our charges, and we will continue to meet to try to find ways to work together to save both the town and the school district money. Does anyone have any questions?
Right, the floor is now open for comments by members of the public or questions. If you have a question on the Board of Education budget, you can direct it to Ms. Collins. If you have a question on the Board of Selectmen budget, you can direct it to Mr. Shook. If you have a question on the Board of Finance, you can direct it to myself. So the floor is open for comments and questions. Somebody must want to say something. Yes, recognize the flyer. I think that one's working, yes.
Laura Library, Prospect Street. I just want to say good job. I thought the cuts from the Board of Selectmen budget were, not easy ones to cut from people's salaries, and so that, that was hard to do, but you did it, and it looks good. And the Board of Education budget was good when I saw it before vacation, it still looks good. So I think they did a great job making the cuts as directed by the Board of Finance, and I think it's a good budget, and I support it. And if you look at that handout that's at the back that you should share with all your friends that Ann did, it's $1 a week for the next year. That's less than a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, just saying. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I guess he's not coming soon. I don't want to close the public hearing if anyone really has something they want to say, so I'll wait a minute or so. And the Board of Finance will be meeting after this, after we close the public hearing to make our final decisions based on the comments here. All right, hearing no comments or questions, I will close the public hearing. The Board of Finance will meet after this evening to make its final decision on the budget. The budget will be presented to the town meeting on May 6th, I believe, is that correct? And the referendum will probably be a week after that. Thank you everyone for coming here this evening.
Yeah, next time we'll get the real quick. All right. All the Board of Finance need to order. have 5 regular members, so Michael should fit in there.
That'll give us enough time.
There's school.
Hey, we could do breakfast on the
Breakfast, sure. Can I have the day
coffee.
off? I can have the day off. Seriously, though.
Service day.
Get out to the street, get out to the street.
Start whatever it is decided that the referendum is going to be. Start to move it and get those.
Well, we just, I mean, now that we know, we're just part of it. And dinner is gonna be part of it, and we've got all the groups together talking about it. So that was the, we're all in it.
As long as you get word out there, because after the is not going to
Keep in mind, you know, I'm going to support the budget. We say the last thing, both ends, just because they didn't show up. No, there's a group that is not going to be happy with those. Right. Also, any increase of 200. Right. At least it's nice. We have a responsibility with the town policy. If we don't give the people who support us, times are going to increase. Both of them, to be safe, don't they? The person wants to stay home. Oh, sure. But the longer you wait, the more expensive it is. That's right. Right. So I think that when we were living off the previous year.
Well, we understand the needs of the town. That's why we've asked.
Part of our responsibility.
Of course, yeah, but
if they would listen to the fire department, they would listen to the, they would listen to the road and the building departments and all of those people that came to us and told us of their plight, then I don't think they would be so upset about what finally the budget is, because I think it's very conservative for what everybody needs.
But there are people out there with fixed income.
I
There are
understand.
suffering right now financially.
There's single parents, have to work 2 jobs.
So it's difficult times. But always, it are always going to be people that are in that situation. You know, I'm retail as well, site planner. Some people are misfortunate, sickness or lose a partner and such makes a big difference. But still, you can't stop. Now, there's an awful lot going on. We finally got the public housing. That's $19 million coming into town, there's over 79 units. That's finished, there's going to be another 79 units there on that side. So it's like a 3-phase thing, so probably maybe 6 years. Then do some work part there. But at the same time, we're looking at getting solar, area that we're working on, and plus get the stuff to gas and the industries, plus the hospital, water, sewer, so there's an awful lot going on. As far as the housing, you get the grant for water, and then it's all going to come by private money. But the hospital part will be some cost there. That's going to happen. So it's tax that grows, it's going to be something
Well, and the cuts you made were reasonable in terms of reaction, did not really impact any services, which I think is the important thing. But the people here, no, but your constituents have to understand that the next, if this does not pass, then there will be,
On both cases, on both the education and the town.
right, right.
Sure.
We have to assume, as I explained to someone I know personally, that if the budget is defeated, then there's going to be a cut in that library position, so. Makes that group get some.
I did after,
Well, but they told that warning to go out to them, so, you know, there'll be cuts all around it. Okay, so, if I understand the consensus of the board is that all the cuts, the budget we approved 2 weeks ago is still the budget that we're recommending to the town meeting, is that correct?
Still recommend, so what we recommend the same time.
Okay, so we make a second? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. All right, that takes care of our business for this evening. I understand there are meetings scheduled, but I'm going to be gone for the next 2 weeks. If there's something comes up that the board has to deal with, there's really no need to make it, so our meeting is
There's no transfers.
yeah.
If there is large, email us the one.
Well, no, it's just a town, it's not a board of finance meeting, and basically, you know, I will be there to present the board of finance's position, but it's not a board of finance. After the referendum, which is a week later, or whatever, a week later, then you'll be meeting